Good afternoon, Ellison Multimedia. Today we are going to review how to get our boards to move along with Mario. So if your Mario is not complete, you might have some issues with completing this next step. So you need to go back and fix or change or complete your Mario so that he runs and jumps. All right. So first thing that we need to do is we're going to use three different areas on this very first sprite. All right, we are working on the sprites that Mario is going to walk on now. We're no longer, for now, working on Mario. So the very first one, the first thing we need to do is tell this sprite to show up at 0 and 0x. It's going to put it directly in the center of our board. All right, keep that in mind. This is 0 and 0, so it shows up directly in the center of our board. All right, next we need to do the same thing for some of the other sprites. All right, so again, this one has 0 and 0. For our next sprite that is going to appear on the board, we actually need this one to be 480. The same thing for the one that follows that one, the one that follows that one, and the one that follows that one. So right now, the only sprite that we should see should be the very first sprite on the board. All right. Next, we need to tell the board to move whenever Mario moves also. So if Mario moves this way, he's coming to this side of the screen, then the board is going to move the opposite way, coming to this side of the screen. So you need to figure out what direction that is and the change of direction that's going to be. All right. Again, that is going to change the direction. So it's going to be heading this direction. And you need to put that coding inside of here. Also, you need to tell it what button to press in order for it to go in that direction. All right. Take 2 seconds to figure that out. All right. Once you have this filled in with the correct code, now we need to use something new. All right. We're going to use something called broadcast. Now, we touched on this the other day in class. Again, broadcast is how one sprite can talk to another sprite. It is the script or coding that allows sprite 1 to tell sprite 2 that it has moved out of the way, and sprite 2 should now begin to move into place. All right. And a broadcast is under our events script. All right. So we have when I receive a broadcast or when I receive something, and then we have something actually called broadcast next sprite 1, or yours might say new message. We're going to use broadcast next sprite 1 or new message. So you can have it say whatever you want. You can code it or tell it whatever message you want. If you click on this little black triangle, you can say new message and type in whatever you want. I'm using next sprite 1. You can use the same thing if you choose. All right, so I'm going to put that in here. Next, you have to figure out when this should be broadcast. All right, so when this sprite moves all the way to the left, it should give us some coordinates, just like with the letters of our names and everything else that we've done so far. So if I move x by -10, when the sprite gets all the way maybe to this point and the next sprite wants to come in, maybe that's when I have it. All right, so I need to, inside of here, say when the x coordinates are less than or greater than maybe 200, that's when the next sprite comes in. You have to experiment with these numbers. They may not be the same for yours. So I know I'm going to use a greater than less than sign. I'm going to say when the x position, and for the sake of class, I'm going to say when the x position is less than -200. I'm going to drag that over in there. So whenever the X position is less than negative 200, it's going to scream out to the other sprites, next sprite 1. All right. So that is step 1 for getting this to work. Step 2, we move on to the next sprite. So in this next sprite, you should already have, when flag is clicked, go to 480, and I want you to hide it. So it's going to disappear. Next, we're going to use a new event. All right, this new event is going to allow our sprite to hear the message that we just broadcast from the first sprite. All right, so we have a when I receive, so that's just like when I hear or when I receive. I want you to use a forever, and then I want you to put show. So when it hears this, it is going to show up on our screen. It is still going to be at this location, but it will show up on our screen. Then we need to tell it if blank then. This is going to be the same coding from right here. So again, this is the coding that tells it when this button is pressed, then it needs to move in a certain direction. So whenever what button is pressed, how do we want this new sprite to move? Again, it should be the same as the very first one. Okay, so we have that. Next, we need to do the same thing we did for this one. When X position hits a certain point, it needs to broadcast the next sprite. So when X hits a certain position, it needs to broadcast to the next sprite. And we're going to now say broadcast next sprite 2. Cannot be the same as the first one. We need to send a completely new message. Okay? All right, for this one, we're doing the same thing. So when this one hears next sprite 2, it needs to show up. Same coding for it to move in a direction. What button needs to be pressed and how should it move? And then we need to code it again. Whenever it gets broadcast, we're going to broadcast next sprite 3. And we're going to say if X position less than 200. Again, we might change these numbers later. They may not be the same for yours. All right, you need to do this for all of the sprites that you have. So I need to do the same thing for these that I have left. It'll take time now to do that. All right, so by now you should have all of the coding for your sprites that Mario is going to walk on. All right, you are going to press your flag, and Mario should be running through the obstacles. All right. So if you feel like these are moving too fast, just change your numbers by how much your X changes by to slow it down. So if you wanted to change or go slower, then you'd use smaller numbers. So if you wanted to go faster, you'd use bigger numbers. All right. Now, as you saw, when Mario runs through the whole board, he probably is going to reach the edge of the screen. It's like my Mario's right now, he's all the way over here. I can't see what's coming up. We need some coding that tells Mario once he reaches the center that he should stay there, all right, so that we can always see what's coming forward. So how do we do that? We say, well, first off, I am inside of Mario's coding, so I'm on Mario's sprite, and we say when our flag is clicked. It's the first thing we need. Next, we say if and then We also need a forever on top of that. All right. So we're saying once this flag is clicked, I want you to always do this. We're going to say if Mario passes a certain point. All right. So we could use another operation. So let's use this one. So we're using the greater than less sign. Than. And how can we measure Mario? So we say if Mario's X position, because he's traveling on the X plane, if Mario's X position becomes greater than 0, again, the X position, if this was a line and this was a line, 0, 0's right here, these are positives, so these would be 400s, 100s, etc. These would be negatives, negative 100, etc. So once he hits that very center point is when we want. Once Mario hits if Mario's X position is greater than 0, then what do we want to happen? All right. I'm going to say we want to set X to 0. So it should always stay at 0. So let's try it. All right. So Mario's running. Inside the board, and we see he's still running, but he's kind of stuck in the middle, and that's how we want him. All right. That's how it should be. So once he can get to the very end of the board. Oh, I'm missing some coding. All right, so I'm still missing coding in my last sprite. So at this point, we're going to walk through the coding for the sprites in case you didn't get them. And this is going to be very similar for all of the sprites. So once this sprite receives next sprite 4, we're going to use the right arrow. We use that arrow for Mario to walk. We're going to use that same arrow. And we're going to change our X by -10, and we want to point it in 90 degrees direction. All right? So let's try this again. Just need to make it to the end of the board. All right, and there we go. So that's how you get Mario to run through the board. There is another area that I had inside of my boards like this. And then for those of you who are a little OCD, you see how all of these pile up in this corner right here. If we get our coding and see where our X is, then we can tell it once it reaches this point to disappear or not show. So we say once X goes to this location, then maybe it should disappear. So we say if, and then hide. So if X is at this point, actually let's do something different. If X is less than something, so let's say if X is less than something, say -200. For X position, it's -200, it should hide over here. All right, you would do this for all of the sprites.